Thank you, Alex. I'm Zach Myers. I'm Director of Research at CERRE. As Alex probably too kindly described me, his intellectual twin. I'm very happy now that we're turning to consumer law. And of course, as Alex, as Kai, as John mentioned, we're in an era where competitiveness is the top of the priority list for the Commission, and so the threshold for introducing new laws, particularly in the tech sector, is especially high. And so a lot of attention is going to be given to the Digital Fairness Act, which is one of the Commission's key proposals for the coming year. And a lot of attention is going to be given to this question about how to make sure that this legislative proposal is proportionate, that we avoid these problems of thinking in silos, that we're thinking about filling gaps rather than creating more overlaps. And obviously this is a much more difficult thing to achieve in practice than in theory. And so I'm really, really proud that at CERRE we are kind of looking at this, and we have an excellent academic team that have just published a paper on this very question. The academics are kind of Christoph Busch from the University of Osnabrück, Amelia Fletcher from the University of East Anglia, and Michelle Ledger from the University of Namur. Today I'm going to introduce Christoph, who will be giving us a tour de force of what the report covers. So please welcome Christoph.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Zach. I have now the pleasure to very briefly present our CERRE report on the upcoming Digital Fairness Act, which I have co-authored with my colleagues Amelia Fletcher and Michelle Ledger. The 60-page report provides a detailed analysis of several key issues that are at the center of the debate surrounding the forthcoming DFA. And as I have only 10 minutes, I can only give you a sort of sneak preview of our main recommendations. But let me start with three more general observations on the broader political context in which the policy debate about the DFA is situated. First, the debate on the DFA unfolds against the background of increasing political emphasis on competitiveness, regulatory simplification, and the need to strengthen the digital single market. That's clear. Second, it's becoming increasingly clear that the DFA will focus on the protection of minors. This is clearly a very important policy objective, but it poses a challenge for the architecture of EU consumer law. Because introducing specific consumer rights for minors will increase the complexity of the regulatory landscape. And we should not forget that adults may also be vulnerable to harms such as addictive design or unfair personalization. And the third point, the policy debate on the DFA is situated within a wider discussion on the evolving contours and objectives of consumer law. Should consumer law focus primarily on economic harms, or also address non-economic harms, or even broader societal issues? That's an open question that is currently being debated. Now, against this backdrop, our report explores 5 topics. Horizontal issues relating to overarching concepts and principles of consumer law, issues with digital contracts and subscriptions, protection of minors, of course, in digital environments, addictive design features, and personalization practices. In terms of horizontal issues, our report underlines that the DFA should not simply add an additional layer of regulation, but focus on filling regulatory gaps and simplify the existing regulatory framework. In doing so, the DFA should be based on 3 general principles for smart digital regulation. First, risk-based regulation. The DFA should address clearly identified problems only where they materialize and cause consumers harm, while at the same time not overburdening traders unaffected by those problems. Second, design-based regulation. We are convinced that for effective consumer protection, it is not sufficient to enshrine consumer rights in legislation and to inform consumers about their rights. Rather, the exercise of consumer rights must be facilitated by designing user interfaces in such a way that consumers can easily exercise their rights and address remedies. Finally, smart digital regulation should be based on an ecosystem approach, because B2C contracts are typically embedded in a broader ecosystem with a variety of players. This means that policy interventions should look beyond the two-party relationship between the trader and the consumer and consider the different roles and responsibilities of various actors in the respective digital ecosystem. We also argue that fairness by design should be considered rather as an interpretative principle rather than a standalone obligation. And we are convinced that the concept of the average consumer is flexible enough to address also systemic and situational vulnerabilities arising in digital environments. One policy area where the Commission has identified a need for updating and strengthening the existing regulatory framework is digital contracts and subscriptions, the subscription economy. Here we have three recommendations. First, instead of providing one-size-fits-all solutions, policy interventions should differentiate according to the risk profile of the specific business model. Goods, services, digital content, short or long-term subscriptions involve different risks and may therefore require different levels of regulation. Second, our report advocates design-based solutions, such as an easy cancellation facility that we see in some member states already. And third, we think that the DFA should address the roles and responsibilities of all actors in the subscription stack, as you might call it, and that would include app stores, payment service providers, and also providers of subscription management software. The need to protect the online lives of children, and we have heard this already today, is at the forefront of the policy debates, not only here in Brussels, but also at member states levels, and rightly so. But currently, there is a lack of horizontal rules protecting minors at the EU level. There are only some sector-specific rules in the DSA, in the AVMSD, and this leads to an unlevel playing field and internal market fragmentation. So, in creating a more level playing field, the DFA could build on the approach of the UCPD and consider that minors are vulnerable consumers. And more specifically, to address the unlevel playing field, the DFA could prohibit online traders from presenting targeted ads to minors based on profiling following the model of the Digital Services Act. And also on age assurance, the DFA should refer to what is already specified in the Article 28 DSA guidelines to ensure coherence between the different instruments. And it's important to re-emphasize that the DFA should not create additional complexity or duplication of rules. Another focus area, and you see I have to rush through the topics of our report, another focus area relates to addictive design features in user interfaces or choice architecture that can drive excessive and also problematic use of digital devices, social media, or video gaming. Any regulation in this area should be carefully designed to ensure that the positive effects of engagement-enhancing design will not be lost to those users who engage responsibly online. Think of language learning apps that use gamification features to enhance user engagement and that help you to learn Japanese, for example. In our view, regulation should therefore be risk-based, differ by type of design feature and context, and type of user. In simple terms, the DFA should give control back to consumers. This means that the DFA should enable and possibly require enhanced activity, spending, and notification controls to be set at a system level to keep things simple. More specific addictive design features could then be set at the individual services level. So one question is, what is the right level of intervention? And for minors, controls should be set as safe by default. Another focus area that has been identified in the digital fairness fitness check is the use of personalization practices by businesses. And personalization is, of course, pervasive across digital services, from ranking, recommendations, and search results for advertising, and sometimes even for personalized pricing, or surveillance pricing, as they call it in the US now. To be clear, personalization is not bad per se. To the contrary, it can actually have positive effects for consumers by making more relevant content available and by reducing search costs. These positive effects should not be lost. But consumers should get more control over how much personalization they want and in which context. Therefore, we argue that consumers should have a simple opt-out option for personalized advertising or offers. In practical terms, one way forward could be a sort of standardized privacy button that enables to take such a choice in a simple and design-based way. To address the unlevel playing field, the DFA could also extend the prohibition of advertising based on special categories of personal data, following the model of Article 26, Para 3 DSA. And last but not least, we think that the DFA should prohibit any kind of advertising that exploits personal or situational vulnerabilities, such as consumer emotional targeting. There is more in our report. That's already the next panel. There is more in our report, and I hope that I have sparked your interest to take a closer look at our policy paper. It's 60 pages, as I said, and now I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.